So if we want to live lives overflowing with integrity, I think it might be a good idea to actually have a definition, a working definition of integrity. And John Blumberg, our guest speaker next week, who is an author and public speaker on integrity, defines it basically as defining selecting your core values and living according to them. And if you take a look at these values, perseverance, harmony, defending the weak, collaboration, empowerment, they're all good. All these values are good. And if I select a subset of these, proactivity, servant leadership, growth, connection, creativity, and many more, mentoring and coaching, those subset kind of define who I am and aspire to be, and they define who you are and aspire to be. And these kinds of values also help us to accomplish the mission here, which is to helping people find their way back to God, right? And so it seems like in reality, or in theory, it might be easy to live out our values, but as you know, in real life, it's not that easy. And that's what we're here to talk about this morning, to talk about the single biggest roadblock to integrity, to living out our values. Do you know what that is? The single biggest? Do you want to know? It's the idols in my life and the idols in your life. They prevent us from living out our lives. They make us stumble and trip over our values. Idolatry is not a word that's often used. We don't use that in conversation. So you probably need to actually define it a little bit. An idol is something or someone you center your heart on, your mind on, to bring you contentment, fulfillment, hope, joy, or energy. And you've actually have your handout so you can fill those out along the way. So an idol brings you look at it, you look for it to give you a contentment, fulfillment, hope, joy, and energy. But the big deal here is in place of God. And so as we're talking here, I want you to start thinking about your idols. And I'm going to give a list of 5 kind of ideas to think about whether these things are idols in your life. Idols are things that occupy your thoughts. Idols are also things that you daydream about. Is it wealth accumulation? Is it fame? Is it, achievement? What is it? Is it a person? It's what you most enjoy talking about. It's what you fear losing the most. It's what you most freely and easily spend your money on. Think I touched a nerve there, huh? All right, so these are just ideas that we can think about. What are our idols? I want you to start writing them down. Later, I'm going to give 2 lists of idols. Idols that are more obvious and those that are maybe hidden from us or subtle. And but in the meantime, again, be thinking about not only the idols that you have in your life, but also how they've kept you from living out your values. And to this end, I'd like us to talk about a John Blumberg quote about values and value drift. Yeah, sure. That's good. People are taking notes. The quiz will be later today. Good. I can send you the presentation if you want as well. So, okay. I'm going to have to go on at this point. In terms of values, the value drift, we don't go running away from our values, we go drifting away. One day we wake up in a place we never meant to be, drifting in a direction we would never have chosen. Pretty pungent, isn't it? So in what venerable ancient text do you think there are examples of idol worship? Of course, the Bible is bursting with stories about idol worship where God's people went astray and started worshiping idols and had a lot of negative consequences. Think about Moses. He goes up on Mount Sinai to get the 10 Commandments just for 40 days. And the people ask Aaron to create an idol, a golden calf. And they start worshiping it. Okay? So it's chock full, the Bible's chock full of stories of God's people worshiping idols instead of God. But it also is filled with stories of helping people find their way back to God, where people make their way back to God, right? So I think it only makes sense that we go to the Old Testament and look at a story about a small group of of God's people who had this incredible pressure to worship an idol and how they worked through it, because I think it'll give us insight into our kind of ever-present temptation to worship things and people for our joy, for our satisfaction, for our fulfillment, and so forth. And to this end, I'd like us to turn to the book of Daniel, to the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Say that with me. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Isn't that fun? Or as it is a little bit, isn't it? If you go to VeggieTales, they call it Rack, Shack, and Benny. So Rack, Shack, and Benny is our three main characters here we're going to talk about. But let me give you some historical background about the book of Daniel. In about 605 BC, the Babylonians under Nebuchadnezzar besieged the city, ransacked the temple, took stuff back to Babylon, and they broke. And then within 20 years, they came back, besieged it again, destroyed the walls. Remember in Nehemiah, we talked about that. The walls were destroyed. They were destroyed about 20 years after the ransacking of the temple. And they were, for over 140 years, they were destroyed until Nehemiah came back and rebuilt them. And to be fair, God sent prophet after prophet after prophet to tell the people in Jerusalem to turn back from worshiping idols to worshiping him. So ironically, that's what created the fall of Jerusalem. Now, the Babylonians were incredibly smart, intelligent conquerors, because they would take their defeated foes and they would assimilate them into their culture by enticing them with the finer things in life. Comfortable, good food, comfortable housing, their language, their culture, give them Babylonian names, make them feel at home. Kind of sound familiar to our culture, maybe, right? Nebuchadnezzar sent 4 Jewish men to come from Israel to help, because they were conquered, to help run their country, their empire. And he tried to do this with Shadrach, and Abednego, right? And of course with Daniel. And here are the criteria for the men that he sent for to help him run his country, and assimilate them and help him run the country. They had to be of noble or royal descent, and they were young men without any physical defect, handsome, showing aptitude for every kind of learning, well-informed, quick to understand, qualified to serve in the king's palace. He was able to teach them the language and literature of the Babylonians. And that's, I think, what our culture often does to us. Tries to assimilate, gives us the nicer things, and helps us to kind of assimilate into the culture. Now, some scholars say about 4,600 Jews these were nobility, these were the leaders of Jerusalem, exiled to Babylon. Okay? And they were given nice training, nice jobs, they learned the language, nice places to stay. Now, let's think about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Things were going kind of nice for them, but put yourself in their shoes, right? These are guys who were uprooted from their country and brought to a foreign country. Imagine if we got overtaken by a foreign country, right? Let's say Brazil. It could happen. It could happen, right? And if we don't think it could, maybe America is one of our idols, right? And then thousands of us were shipped off to run the government. We learned Portuguese. We learned their literature, their culture, right? Probably thinking we will never return back to the U.S., never return home. So these guys, they're doing fine in the sense that now their circumstances are better, but they're in a foreign land. And in chapter 3, here's where everything starts turning. And it says that King Nebuchadnezzar actually created a golden statue that was 90 feet tall and 9 feet wide. I mean, it was probably in his image. And you can imagine, like in a city like Chicago, something 9 stories tall, 90 feet tall. It's kind of dwarfed, right? Because there's a lot of buildings that are 50-plus stories, right? But imagine there where most structures are 1, 2, 3 stories. You could see that for miles and miles. It was a magnificent statue, right? And so it was probably about, the bean at the Millennium Park. It's probably about 3 beans high, okay? So it was kind of but it would have been dwarfed in Chicago, not there though. So you could see for miles. And for the dedication service, the dedication of this big statue, here's where it gets interesting. King Nebi, let's call him Nebi, summoned his officials, his magistrates, his judges, his governors from the provinces that he had overtaken. Brought him there for this big, christening, right? And he ordered everyone to bow down and worship the golden statue. Okay? So all the people were forced to bow down. And you can see a rendition of the statue. And let's see if this works. Is it working? Okay, well, right here there's a guard, so you can see kind of the magnitude of that. So it's a pretty amazing statue. But if you kind of blow up the shot a little bit more, what you see is 3 Hebrew men from Judah who are not bowing. Everyone else is bowing. Where are the 4,600 they came with that all were supposed to worship God and not bow down to idols? They're all bowing, right? And right next to them, there's a guy saying, "What you doing, man? Hey, dude, get down. Get down, dude. What's it going to cost you? Just get down. So what? We know that's crazy, this golden statue, but just worship it. You're going to get killed if you don't. King Nebuchadnezzar said he's going to throw us in the furnace and kill us if we don't bow down." Right? So basically, they were talking about taking a stand, standing up to take a stand, right? It's incredible peer pressure. And they didn't worship the idol, the statue. Hi, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, please subscribe and give it a thumbs up. And feel free to share it with someone you think would enjoy the message. Thanks.